Hi everybody. In this video we're going to talk about inverse operations. Now inverse operations are operations that undo each other. So what do I mean by that? Let's take a look at an example. Let's say we start with the number, could be anything. How about the number 8? And then we add 3. What would we get? We would get 11, right? And now what if we take 11 and subtract 3? Well, 11 minus 3 is 8. Okay, so we started with a number, we added 3, and then we subtracted 3. We added something and then we subtracted the same number, and the number that we ended up with is exactly the same as the number that we started with. So it's like this subtraction over here undid the addition that we did over here so that we ended up with the number that we started with. So we would say that addition and subtraction are inverse operations. If I start with something and then I add a number and then I subtract the same number that I added, then the number that I end up with is going to be the same as the number that I started with. Okay, and just to get you in the habit of looking at this vertically, inverse operations are going to be very important when we start solving equations. And when we solve equations, instead of everything being written horizontally like this, you should get used to seeing things written vertically. So this is how it would look. 8 plus 3 and then minus 3 is equal to 8. So all of this means exactly the same thing as this does. It's just written vertically instead of horizontally. Okay, and obviously we could have started with subtraction also. So we could have done, if I do 8 minus 3 is 5, and then 5 plus 3 is 8 again. So 8 minus 3 and then plus 3 is equal to 8. And sometimes what we do is we cross out these 3's over here and we say that these 3's cancel, okay? But all that means is that the number we ended up with is the same as the number we started with. So the addition here undid the subtraction over here. Let me do now another example with multiplication. I don't know why I'm thinking so hard about what color I want to use. Let's just pick green. All right, so what about this? 30, you know what, I'll start, gosh. Let's start with 5, and what do I get if I take 5 and I multiply it by 7? Hopefully you know your times tables. 5 times 7 is 35. So now what if I take this 35? This over here, 5 times 7 is 35. Now let me take this 35 and divide by 7. What would I get there? 35 divided by 7 is 5. So the number that I ended up with is the same as the number that I started with. So this division by 7 sort of undid this multiplication by 7. Okay, and if we wanted to write that vertically, we could write it like this. Okay, this means exactly the same thing as this over here. 5 times 7 and then divided by 7 is equal to 5 again. Okay, and we could say that these 7's cancel out so that what we end up with is the same as what we started with. And it also works if we do the division first, except you know what, I really don't want to start with 5 and then divide. So how about this? I'll start with 35 and then divide by 7. So what is 35 divided by 7? That is 5. And then what is 5 times 7? 5 times 7 is 35. Okay, so again, I ended up with the same number that I started with. All right, so these cancel out. Now, something else that I'll mention, obviously, the number that is, so for example, over here, the number that I add has to be the same thing as the number that I subtract. So for example, if I add 3 and then I then I subtract 6. So 8 plus 3 is 11. 11 minus 6 is 5, right? It's not 8. So obviously, if I add and subtract different numbers, then the number that I end up with is not going to be the same as the number that I started with. So it only works if the numbers that I add and subtract are the same. Same thing with multiplication and division, okay? All right, so let's just get that back to the way that we like it, with the numbers here and here being the same. Okay, so now just a quick recap of those inverse operation pairs. The inverse of addition is subtraction. The inverse of subtraction is addition. The inverse of multiplication is division. And the inverse of division is multiplication. That's it. Have a great day.